Scholomance Academy. This was considered by a lot of people to be the strongest expansion ever at one point. And it was basically for 3 expansions until Stormwind came out, so it's not hard to justify. This is the first expansion to introduce dual class cards, so I might touch on some of those, but we'll see. And yeah, let's get into it for Demon Hunter. I'm a big fan of Soul Shard or Soul Fragment Demon Hunter, Soul Shard Demon Hunter, whatever you want to call it. I think that, if Blizzard really somehow printed Swordfish, a 3-mana 4/2 that also gives a pirate 2 attack, and somehow that was fair, I don't see why the Marrow Slicer can't go to 3. Truly don't see why it can't. This would be pretty significant for like an odd Demon Hunter, because you have an actually really good statted 3-mana weapon for your Sock Puppet Slither Spear, because that gains attack from your weapon as well, and just would provide so much damage. This would be genuinely significant, and I like Soul Shards. I think that they probably could come back. You could make, I don't know, I think they're just really cool, personally. And I think a lot of people really did enjoy Soul Shard Demon Hunter when it was around in, Scholomance. Didn't really see that much play in Darkmoon Faire, but because it got nerfed. But in Scholomance, it was incredibly powerful and just fun. It's very fun. I like the idea behind it. I like spending a secondary resource like Soul Shards, so there it is. Star Student Selina. This is like a bafflingly bad legendary, especially in terms of early Demon Hunter, because, Ashes of Outlands and Scholomance Academy Demon Hunter was incredibly powerful. So for Selina to just be like this terrible of a card, it says a lot about how weak it is, right? I think the first thing you need to do is you can bump Selina down to 3 mana, and then I don't think Outcast makes sense for this card. Outcast is supposed to be like an additional powerful effect on the card, right? And this isn't an Outcast. This isn't worthy of being an Outcast effect, in my opinion. When you look at Jade Telegram does the same thing, and it's a Caverns of Time card. So why is this an Outcast? It should just be a Battle Cry. Should not be an Outcast. I don't care if you think that, thematically, Demon Hunter gets these Outcasts. Jade Telegram is a perfect example of a card that is, it's not a legendary. It was 3 mana, but for some reason never got reverted. So it was 3 mana to do the same effect versus 4 mana. It didn't have a condition like Outcast, and summoning a Jade Golem is maybe worse than a 4/3, but it's also maybe better. So yeah, Selina should go to 3. This one, I don't care what your opinion on it is. I think Gibberling should go back to 1 mana. It was 1 mana, got nerfed because it was way too strong. Token Druid has been unplayable garbage for a long time, and Gibberling is Gibberling. Would it be strong? Oh, for sure. Would it make Token Druid playable? Possibly not. Druid hasn't gotten very good AoE buffs in a long time. They've gotten some okay ones, but they haven't really got things anywhere close to the same power level as Mark of the Lotus. Arbor Up, isn't even that great anymore, so you can't really rely on that. And then the synergy cards that Druid has been getting are tribal, there's Beast synergy or their Treant synergy. I guess Treants aren't technically a tribe, but they should be. So Gibberling probably wouldn't make a Token Druid anything crazy. Would it be good? Yes, for sure, but I think that this one's pretty simple in my opinion. Showild Claw. So this card is actually truly terrible in both classes. It's so bad. I think that what you need to do is just, instead of give your beasts in your deck +1/+1, it should be maybe give your beasts for the rest of the game have +1/+1 or something. I mean, this card's just so bad, right? It's so hard to talk about. I'm not even talking about this from a Hunter perspective as well. Even from a Druid perspective, this card is terrible. Yes, it's a dual class card and it would affect both classes, but I don't know. I'm just not sure. Maybe you could rework it completely, But I want to talk about this card because it's just such a bad dual class card. It's hard to really justify. I think it should probably say, give beasts in your hand, deck, and battlefield +1/+1, or transform into a copy of a friendly beast. Would that help? Yeah, a lot. Would it make it a good card? Probably not. I'm not sure what you would do, because transform into a copy of a friendly beast is... I mean, that just has to be reworked, right? You couldn't really make that work, I don't think. And I don't think, Shando being 2 mana really makes much sense. I don't know. I really wanted to bring this one up because I want to see what your guys' ideas for Shando should be, because this is such a terrible card, and it's an interesting one. It's it's a legendary dual class minion. It should be at least interesting and good, and it is interesting, but it's not good. It's just so bad. So I want to know what you guys think. Then again, Guardian Animals. This is a card that would affect both Hunter and Druid. I think this one's pretty simple. You just lower it to 6 mana. Super simple change. It just speeds it up a little bit. Potentially, you can increase this to 6. I'm not sure of the ramifications of that off the top of my head. I would have to look at 6 mana beasts that both classes have access to. But, summoning Mukla would be pretty good, I could say. That might be too strong, actually. Now that I think about it, summoning Mukla, not getting the battle cry, and summoning another minion might be too good. You do have the disfortune of not being able to run your actually powerful, early beasts, like your Buzzard, like your Dreadscale, sorry. So that is a trade-off, but I don't know. Maybe it should stay at 5. However, I'm going to keep it like this just because it's interesting, because it's really strong, because people can talk about it more. And yeah, I think Guardian Animals is actually a very cool card. I am going to say this. I think that if Guardian Animals didn't get nerfed at the time, Odd Hunter in Wild would have been quite good with it. I was experimenting a lot with it, right? And I was actually seeing a lot of success with an Odd Hunter that ran Guardian Animals and bigger beasts. And this card then got nerfed to 8 mana before I could really, do much more with it. So there's that. That's just my thought process on it. Just a little thing. But yeah. Also, if this does go to 6 mana, you could run it in Even Hunter. I just thought about that now. Even Hunter with 6 cost beasts, and that's kind of really funny. But again, you can't run your Phase Stalker, so would you? Probably not. Okay, so Professor Slate. As it currently stands, this card is completely useless. You may ask, oh, why? Isn't giving your spells poisonous really strong? And it is. It is very strong. You either pay 1 mana to do it, or you play Acid Maw, which effectively has the same text, but also affects your minions, weapons, anything else. Any other kind of damage. So Professor Slate is caught in this limbo of being worse than a spell that does exactly what it does, and being worse than another minion that is the exact cost of what it does. So I think you have to change this card twofold. First of all, you make it cheaper. You make it 2 mana. Would that affect the card? No, not in the slightest. And you give it poisonous. Now it's poisonous. Your spells are poisonous. Is this better? Yes. Does this make the card good? I would say no. I think that if you wanted this card to see any kind of play, it would have to be 1 mana. But I don't think they're going to print a 1 mana card or a 1 mana minion that would have, your spells are poisonous. So that's why I was like, okay, make it 2 mana and get it poisonous. Maybe that's a little bit better. Maybe. But for Professor Slate to see any play, it itself would have to be 1 mana. And I doubt that they would ever do that. Because if not, it's just always going to be worse than Urchin Spines. And even at 2 mana, it's so specific to your spells. And Hunter doesn't really have that great of spells. Yeah, you have a lot of 1 mana pings, but okay. You don't have any AoE damage, at all. You have Grievous Bite and Bola Shot. And maybe Shell Shot. So, those cards hit 3 things. For 4 or 5 mana, with this being 2. It's actually 5 or 6 mana. That's so bad. It's so terrible. There's a reason that this card sucks. I don't know. I think if you were to make it like a 1-mana 1/3, it would actually be quite good. It'd probably be a little too strong, even in some aspects of like maybe certain decks. Maybe Questline Hunter would abuse it too much. Who knows? But I think the 2-mana 2/3 poisonous is about the best you can get. I wouldn't personally make it a 1/3 because I feel like that's too scary. But if you really think that it needs to be a 1/3, I completely understand that. Firebrand. So this card is one of the kind of cards I like in Mage. It's actually it was quite decent, and it's really good at fighting for the board, which Mage struggles a lot with, and doesn't get cards that help in any way, right? So I'm thinking just knock Firebrand down to 2 mana, maybe like a 2 mana 2/2, because deal 4 for 2 mana is a lot. It still has the spell burst cost, which means you have to spend extra mana on a spell, but it could be the coin. So there's that. I think that Mage needs cards like this to have a slower game plan very consistently. You know, a Reno Mage could come back with cards like Firebrand and other cards I've talked about in the past. I'll talk about another card for Mage once I get down. You already know what it is if you pay any attention or know what cards are in Scholomance. You'll know what it is. Actually, I'll just do it now. What am I talking about? I was thinking I would wait until Rogue to talk about Jandice, but I don't need to do that. I think Jandice could be 4 mana in today's game. Not really. I don't really have much to say about it. It's a 2/1 that summons a random 5 cost, and that one of those 5 costs effectively has 1 health. There are a lot of stinker, really bad rolls in Wild for 5 drops. 5 drops are pretty inconsistent. So there is that. But I think that, 4 mana Jandice would be incredible for both Rogue and Mage as a tempo card. It would be great in like even Mage. Reno Mage would run this. If there could be a tempo Mage, it would run this. And Rogue still can't make use of a 4 mana Jandice. That's how horrible tempo Rogue cards are in compared to like the other cards in Rogue. There's just no reason to play a tempo Rogue. It just would never make use of Jandice. So it's a little unfortunate for Rogue, but it's still a buff nonetheless. And of course, talk about it for Mage. Yeah. First day of school. This card was originally 0 mana. Then it was nerfed to 1 mana, get 3 random 1-cost minions. Then it was nerfed again to only have 2 random. I don't see why this card can't go back to 0 mana. I'm going to be so 100% honest with you guys. I don't see why it can't. It was good in Standard. Don't get me wrong. In Wild, it's pretty decent. It saw a little bit of play. I might have seen actually a little more now that I think about it, but I think that this card is just a big step in the right direction for your Reno Paladin, stuff like that. It gives you a little more value. It makes it so you have more consistent 1 mana options on turn 1, which the deck kind of doesn't have that many of. It gives you some mana to fill in your turns if you need it, kind of similar to even decks. And it's good in hand buff. First day of school, you play it for 0 mana, you get 2 bodies to get hand buff. They cost 1 mana, so they're really cheap. It's a pretty good card for those decks, like any kind of hand buff Paladin, and I think that it's just nice. Even Paladin would probably also like this card, to be honest with you. Pressing the button is not great. It's fine. You're not upset about it. But it's more like one of those, I just have extra mana because I'm playing Paladin and I don't really have any way to cheat other stuff out kind of thing. So, your turn 2, you can play a minion and tap. Your turn 5, you get to play 2 cards, maybe play 1 card, and then tap. You just get an extra 1/1 every turn. So, first day of school kind of fits the same idea. Gather Your Party is, 7 years old at this point. Commencement would have been 3 years after. Sorry, quick math. In today's game, Commencement could easily be 6 mana. That's not a question. It's just, it gives a Taunt and Divine Shield, which sometimes isn't that great, actually. Usually it doesn't matter, but there are some cases where you don't want the minion to have Taunt and Divine Shield. Say you're pulling a Troublemaker in Warrior. You don't want that to have Taunt, because you want it to not be targeted first, So So there is like some type of downside. It's not a big one. You don't care that much usually, but it is notable. But Commencement could easily be 6 mana in today's game. Like I'm saying, Gather Your Party was released 7 years ago, and it sucks. Commencement can be the same cost as Gather Your Party. It just can. Big Warrior and Big Paladin struggle so much in Wild. These cards probably wouldn't even help either of them, to be honest with you. So there is that, but it's still interesting enough that I think Commencement should go to that cost. Okay. I think that Mindrender Lucia can go back to 2 mana, but keep the replace your hand with copies of opponents until the end of your turn. All it needs. This card would still genuinely not see any play. It would probably be okay in a Thief Priest, and maybe, just maybe, Shadow Priest would like it. But it's not this ultra disruption tool that it was before, where you'd steal cards from your opponent, basically, while still being a good reload tool, which is kind of the idea behind it. Does this card need to be reverted? Probably not. Do people want it fully reverted? Yeah, for some reason. Do people not want it fully reverted? Oh, for sure. But I think just putting it back to 2 mana is just step in the right direction, helps this card out a lot, helps this kind of like reload for Shadow Priest out a lot, and that's all it really needs to be. Devout Pupil. This is a really cool card, actually. It saw a lot of play in like Libram Paladins. It probably wouldn't be the worst thing ever in like a Miracle Priest if you gave it a buff, and just the buff. I think this card could probably go to a 6/6. Maybe that's too much, actually. It does have Divine Shield. Maybe more like a 5/6. Give it +1/+1. I don't think you really need to change the mana cost, anything like that. This is just like a little buff. It's just a little buff. This would push, Libram Paladin a tiny bit. Would it be great? Probably not. Would Miracle Priest run this? Probably not. I'm going to be honest. Maybe it could be a 6/6 because of that. Because Miracle Priest has some pretty stiff competition already in Grave Horrors, which are 7/8s. This does have Divine Shield, of course, but that still has the +1/+2 over it, especially for your inner fires. I think this is significant of enough buff that you would consider it. Would it instantly see play in Miracle Priest? I don't think so. I really don't. But I think that this is enough of a buff where sometimes it might be. It just might be. And I think that's where, you should go for a card like this, right? Maybe it's good enough to play in Miracle Priest. It still probably isn't, because it would be a little annoying to deal with the Divine Shields, but it wouldn't be anything crazy. It would make you a little bit better into aggro, but again, it wouldn't really make much of a difference. It also has the distinction of cast on friendly characters, unlike just spells cast. So there still is a world where you can never actually get these that low, so it's still just worse than Grave Horror. I think Infiltrator Lilian is one of my most loved cards. At one point in Standard, I was playing Death Rattle Rogue, where I was running Lilian, and then I was running like Counterfeit Blade, I think it's called, and then you would play super aggressively, and then you could get your Lilian back from your Counterfeit Blade, and it effectively had charge, stuff like that. I've already said before that I really like Stealth Rogue, so I think that this card could easily just go to a 3 mana, nothing else. Don't need to touch its stats, because 4/2 still is very easy to clear with removal, which is the idea behind a lot of the Stealth Rogue cards that I've changed. I think that they should have low health to balance them, but still be quite powerful against decks that don't have AoE removal. But of course, being weak into AoE removal is a big part of it. And I think all it needs to be is 3 mana, I'm going to be honest. This would just be a cool card at 3 mana. It's a 4/2 that if you bump it, it still sends 4 damage. Maybe face, maybe to another minion. If it gets cleared by an AoE, it still sometimes deals damage. It's just pretty cool. I don't know. I like this. I like this card a lot. I like Infiltrator Lilian a lot. So I've been toying with multiple different ways that you could buff Krastenov. This card used to be pretty decent in like Weapon Rogues, and it's never really been that great in Warrior. It's been okay. So I'm thinking of like, how can you make this better in Warrior while still making it better in Rogue, but not like anything crazy? And I think that it's probably durability, right? So say you buff it to a 4/4, because Yeah. And then you give your weapon durability. This matters a lot more for Warrior than it does for Rogue, because say you have what's it called? Wrench Caliber. Wrench Caliber benefits incredibly from durability buffs. And like rogue weapons that want to be buffed don't benefit from durability. Like your Kingsbane would not want to run Krasinov for multiple reasons, but partially because you don't want your durability to go up on your rogue weapons that often. The only rogue weapon that really cares about its durability and being buffed is your Spectral Cutlass, which would also really like this card, because then they don't have to play Thief cards as much, because Thief cards suck. So you can actually have your Krasinov buff your weapon pretty significantly. +1/+2 is 2 damage, the attack alone is 2 damage, but just because it gives 2 durability, it makes it so your weapon is going to attack 2 more times. So that's another, who knows, amount of damage. Probably like 5 or 6 damage on average. Not 5, I guess it would be 6, about 6 damage on average, I would say, that you get increased by this 2 durability. And, the 1 attack from this card. So would you pass up a 4-mana 4/4 that does 6 damage on average with Rush? Probably not. You will probably not pass it up in a deck like your Spectral Cutlass Rogue. Or, your Wrench Caliber in Warrior, would love it. So I think that, giving Krasinov, this kind of buff is pretty cool, actually. Since most weapon buffs cards focus primarily on the attack, not the durability itself. In the same vein, I think that Steel Dancer could be buffed, and it would benefit, your weapon style, rogue, and warrior decks. Make it a 3-mana 3/3. Now it's more in line with, your SI7 card that, summons based on how many SI7s you've had, or your Corpse Farm, which summons based on how many corpses you have spent, or how many corpses you have, up to 8 or something like that. In the 3-mana range, yeah, it's a 3/3, but giving your weapon a lot of attack is a lot harder than having, 8 corpses, I would say. So I think that Steel Dancer going to this is pretty good. Again, I don't think Steel Dancer would really see any play in Rogue, but in Warrior, this would be a significantly powerful card, especially these Wrench Caliber, weapon buff kind of Warrior decks I'm talking about would really like a card like this. It gives them a lot of tempo. If you just play, your battle pick, your Wrench Caliber, and nothing else, it's still going to summon, a 3 or 4 drop on this 3 drop already. That's pretty big. Unlike in Rogue, which they don't care about this kind of tempo as much, they just want to go face. They wouldn't really be able to abuse Steel Dancer that much. So I think, yeah, it's a buff to Rogue, but it's more primarily a buff to Warrior, in my opinion. If in the future we see a weapon style Rogue that actually plays aggro rather than just Kingsbane, which is just, whatever Kingsbane is, I don't even want to describe that, then Steel Dancer would be pretty good there, and that's what I'm planning for with a buff like this. Instructor Fireheart is it's a huge fan favorite card. If you played during the era of, Scholomance through, Alterac, all this kind of stuff, Instructor Fireheart is one of the most iconic Shaman cards from this era. It saw play in Elemental Shaman. It saw play in Questline Shaman. It saw so much play in this era. It's such a powerful card. It's so cool. It's genuinely an incredibly cool card. I don't know how you would really buff this card, I'm going to be honest. Maybe you could say they cost 1 less. Maybe you could say it's 2 mana. Maybe you could do some other stuff they don't have Overload. That would be cool, actually. Play it this turn, it doesn't have Overload. That's actually a really cool effect, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know. The formatting looks weird, but if they were to make this card, it would look better. So I'm thinking, give it a little health buff too. Fuck it, Weeball. Instructor Fireheart. Battlecry. Discover a spell that costs 1 or more. If you play it this turn, it doesn't overload. I guess I should put it that. It doesn't overload, and repeat this effect. So if you get overload cards, you don't feel bad about them. That's pretty interesting. I'm not gonna lie. Like, this is such a cool card now. I'm sorry. I'm just like, wow, this is so much more interesting because a lot of shaman spells are pretty powerful, but they overload you and they suck so much. Maybe this would have been better to be 2 mana and just remove the overload effect. Maybe, but like, I'm not too sure. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think that I think it might be a little too strong, but fuck it, we goddamn ball, I guess. Maybe I'll make it like a 2-2 or 2-3. 2-2, something like that, because, you know, it's 3 mana, 3-3. I think that doing this doubly would make the card probably see play. This would definitely see play, actually, with this kind of effect in Wild. Would it be too strong? I can't tell you. I really couldn't, because I don't think you would run this in, like, a deck that would be able to abuse this super hard. You wouldn't really want to run this in, like, a Frog Shaman or, like, a Nature Shaman for Standard, I guess what it's called in Standard. But like Frog Shaman wouldn't really want to run this because it's a minion. You don't really want to run very many minions. The minions you do run are already pretty specific. But would, Shudder Shaman play this? Probably. Honestly, probably. Would an Even Shaman play this? Oh, for sure. Even Shaman would love this card. It gives them so much value. It's like a Flint, but not as bad. Even Shaman would super love this card. So I think, yeah, it hits the mark of being a playable card, and it's a lot more interesting at that point, too. Tidal Wave. Golganesh is 6 mana to do this to all enemies. And it's a minion, and it's a Titan, so it has more effects. Tidal Wave could just be, like... It could just be this. I'm going to be honest. Chaos Nova is 5 mana, deal 4 to all minions. This is +1 mana for -1 damage and lifesteal. This one's like super simple, I'm gonna be honest. I don't think that this would be too strong. I think this would make you actually run spells in Shaman, because Shaman doesn't really run spells. The spells that, Reno Shaman or Shudder Shaman kind of runs are like hyper specific to what they explicitly want. And they don't really run slow removal cards like this. Sometimes they run like Baking Soda Volcano, but that's not even guaranteed. Some lists don't. So Tidal Wave at 6 makes a lot more sense. I already touched on Soul Shards being really fucking cool in Demon Hunter, actually. So I want to talk about them in Warlock with Shadowblight Scholar. This card, why was this card 3 mana? I mean, like, Medivh's Valet, which was printed, like, I don't even know, like 8 years before this card came out? Or something? Not 8 years, probably like 6. 7? 6. Like 6 years before this card came out. It's 2 mana, deal 3 damage if you control a secret. Controlling a secret, I would say, is significantly easier than having Soul Shards. And this also destroys one of your Soul Shards, which makes your militia worse. Destroying Soul Shards is cool and all, but you actually don't really want to destroy them. Like, you like getting the healing from your Soul Shards. You like getting your militia to get, I think that's what it's called, your 3/3s from your Soul Shards. So this is like an actual downside to destroy Soul Shards. So why can't Shadowlight Scholar just be 2 mana, deal 3 for the condition? It's also not very easy to get Soul Shards out by turn 2. There's 1 card, and then maybe if you're on the coin, you can do it. There's 2 cards that can get Soul Shards out by turn 2. So, Shadowlight Scholar could easily just be like this. It just could. I don't really have much more to say about it. It's just, Medivh's Valet already exists. Shadowlight Scholar could easily be this. Okay, this one's going to be a little maybe controversial, but I think that you could increase the amount of Soul Shards you get from School of Spirits to 4. Now, it reads, 3 mana, deal 2 to all minions, shuffle 8 health into your deck that if you draw it, you'll heal. Because Soul Shards heal you for 2. If you didn't know that, there's 0 mana spells that heal you for 2, cast when drawn. So now you get 8 from School Spirits. This is kind of similar to something like Mortal Eradication, I think it's called, which is, the 3 mana, deal 1 damage 5 times to minions if they... Or is it deal 2 damage 5 times to minions? I don't remember. I'll just look it up. It's deal 5 damage split amongst minions. That's what it is. So, and then it heals you for 2 every minion you kill. School Spirits deals 2 to the board, and then it'll heal you for 8 total. It's pretty similar to that card now, and how much it'll heal you, and like what it does, its effect. It's a little less healing if compared to the high roll of Mortal Eradication, but it's AoE damage rather than just 5 damage randomly split. So it does have that trade-off. I think this is much more interesting. It also makes up for the fact that you want to be spending your soul shards, like with your Shadowlight guy that I just buffed as well. So yeah, Playmaker is a really cool card. It actually has seen a lot of play. It's time in Standard. You know, people still experiment with it in Wild because it just provides so much. Why does it need to have the 1 health remaining anymore? It doesn't. Just after you play a Rush minion, summon a copy. Super simple. It would help, you know, your if you want to have like some specific skipper combos with it, you know, by resummoning Rush minions, it would help a lot there. It just doesn't need the 1 health required thing. It's a 3 mana tax to even do it, which in Wild 3 mana taxes are a lot worse than they are in Standard. So I don't think Playmaker needs to have the with 1 health remaining tag at all. Rattle Gore! So the way that Rattle Gore currently works is that it will resummon itself 8 times. It'll go from 9 all the way down to 1. If you buff it, it still summons based on the original one. So I was thinking, why couldn't it just be like 10-10? Maybe even 8 mana. Fuck it, who cares? The mana cost doesn't really matter because you want to be cheating this out. But at 10 mana, now it'll resummon 9 times. So if you play the 10-10 Rattle Gore, the first death puts it back to OG Rattle Gore. That's the thing. Which is incredible. It's incredibly powerful. I think that, like, this, you know, big Rattle Gore would help a lot. It makes it so you can actually drop this, and then if it gets removed, eventually you grind out your opponent. The issue with Rattle Gore, of course, is Reno Lone Ranger. Rattle Gore, even if it gets to pop once, maybe twice, it'll probably get cleared by Reno Lone Ranger at some point, you know, in your slower matchups, which sucks so goddamn much, but there's not really much you can do about it. I can't do anything about it, right? I'm buffing these cards with the idea of, like, oh, how you can play with them, but, like, Reno Lone Ranger just ruins the entire existence of almost every big card ever. It's the biggest failure design card I would say ever. It's so awful. It completely makes all big decks or Death Rattle based decks completely unviable, basically from now until forever. That card just ruins the game. It completely ruins the game. So yeah, this buff to Rattle Gore probably would have mattered, you know, 2 years ago. It probably would have been significant. But doesn't matter anymore because of Reno Lone Ranger. So, you know what? Get fucked, I guess. Fuck me too, right? Mana Feeder Panthara. Okay. In today's game, you would never run this in any deck at all, whatsoever. Even decks don't want to run this because it's not that great of a card. Regular decks don't want to run this because they don't want to spend mana on their hero power. So what do? You put it in the one deck it can't go in. Odd decks. One mana, 1/2. Battlecry if you use your hero power this turn, draw a card. Odd decks, every single odd deck struggles with card draw. Every single one. This is a gigantic help for every odd deck. This would probably be really good in Odd Hunter, Odd Druid, Odd Demon Hunter. Odd Warrior would love this card. Every single odd deck would like this card. It has 1 attack, so it can be tutored by Crystology and Odd Paladin. It's a beast, which is significant for Odd Hunter. Odd Demon Hunter would love this because it's so cheap, and they can make use of their 1 mana hero power incredibly efficiently with it because it's still 1 mana. And then Odd Warrior has a negative card draw, so it would love a card like this. If you name an odd deck that is in any way playable, it would love 1 mana feeder. Because they want to be pressing their hero power button. They want to be drawing cards. Every deck wants to be drawing cards. So 1 mana Panthara helps a lot. Vectus. This is like an actually surprisingly very powerful Death Rattle support card. It's just so expensive. It's 5 mana. This card could easily be 4 mana. It's not hard. I know a lot of these cards aren't interesting. I'm like, oh, knock off 1 mana, knock off this, knock off that. you have to understand that these cards were incredibly powerful when they came out. Almost every single card that I've touched saw play when they came out. So, and they're so recent that, like, some of them still even saw play in Wild for fairly recently, you know? Or they were nerfed because they were so powerful. Or they were still even good in Wild before they were nerfed. Things like that. So, I can't really touch these cards as much. I can't give them as drastic of buffs because that's how power creep works, you know? Because cards get stronger over time, the kind of buffs I can give to these cards just goes down significantly. Is that less interesting? Yeah, it is. Is it the truth? Oh, for sure. So Vectus just going to 4 mana fits perfectly. This card now is so significantly better at being a Death Rattle support card. It's kind of unreal because this card already was pretty good when it came out, so 4 mana makes sense. And then last but not least, it's Voracious Reader. This card was 2 mana when it came out. Absurd card, by the way, in Standard. In Wild, it was pretty decent, I will admit. Decks like Shadow Priest loved it. Hunter loved it, things like that. I think this card can go back to 2 mana by today's standards. It would probably be fair. It's really iconic to this era of, aggro for me. And every aggro deck was running this card because it's so powerful. Would they be running it nowadays? Maybe not. I would run this in, even Druid for sure, even Hunter, but would you run this in Shadow Priest? Possibly not. Possibly so, don't get me wrong. But I still think there's a world where maybe this doesn't make the cut in decks like that. Aggro Demon Hunter doesn't really exist, and Aggro Demon Hunter made a great use of this card at the time. You would be playing, Odd if you're playing, an Aggro DH, which is the thing. So, yeah. But would Aggro DH love this card? Probably, because the non-odd Aggro Demon Hunter runs the cards like your Bibliomite, your Dispose of Evidence, and your Sightless Magistrate, which draws you 5 cards if you have no cards in hand. Or draws you up, makes it so you go up to 5 cards. And then Voracious Reader slots perfectly in a deck like that, right? It's super cheap, it draws you a lot of cards. You'll probably draw 2, 3, 4 cards off of this throughout a game, to be honest with you, if you're playing it properly. So you would really love Voracious Reader. But yeah, that's going to be it for me. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I have a giveaway going on. You'll see that throughout the video. I've posted things like that. So yeah, tell me what your favorite card is, what your least favorite one is. Did I do any changes you don't like? Do I do any changes you like? Should I have changed some cards? Are there anything that you just want to say? Tell me your favorite card is down below to enter the giveaway. And if you're a member, you get an extra chance at a member-only giveaway. So you can become a member through YouTube. It's very similar to a Twitch subscription. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Rising again! Darker than they've ever been.